40 cycles of war had taught Wraith everything about killing. He knew the weak points of 17 different species, understood the rhythm of battle like others understood music, and carried scars that mapped a career of victory. Other Talveen warriors sought his advice. Commanders requested him for difficult campaigns, and enemies learned to fear his ship's approach. Combat held no mysteries for him anymore. The tactical display showed 5 coalition vessels approaching through the asteroid field. Small ships, lightly armed, probably a patrol group that wandered too far from their territory. Wraith's fleet outnumbered them 3-1. This would be over quickly. "Commander, we are detecting unusual readings from the second vessel," Brennan said from his station. His first officer rarely showed concern, but something in his voice made Wraith look up. "What kind of readings?" "The crew composition is strange. Mostly a species called humans. They joined the coalition recently." Wraith searched his memory. Humans, yes, he had heard of them. Soft creatures from a water-rich world, no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They breathed the same air mixture as a dozen other species, and had barely developed faster than light travel when the coalition found them. Weak things, probably scientists or diplomats, certainly not warriors. "Humans are not a threat," Wraith said. "They are barely more dangerous than the merchants we escort." Brennan nodded but did not look convinced. The Talveen way of war had rules, traditions going back thousands of years. 2 fleets met in open space, declared their intentions, and fought with honor. The stronger side won, the weaker surrendered, and everyone understood their place in the galaxy. Clean, simple, proper. Wraith opened a communication channel. His words would be translated and sent to all 5 coalition ships. "Coalition vessels, you have entered Talveen Dominion space. This territory belongs to us by right of conquest. Surrender your ships immediately, and your crews will be treated according to the conventions of war. Refuse and we will destroy you. You have 2 minutes to decide." Silence filled those 2 minutes. Wraith expected the coalition commander to realize the situation and accept the loss. Instead, a reply came from the human ship. "This is Captain Ilyana of the Defiant Spirit. We acknowledge your claim to this space. Our weapons are powering down now. We request safe passage to return to coalition territory." Wraith smiled. Sensible creatures, these humans. They understood when they were beaten. "Request denied. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Your ships will be taken as prizes and your crews will be held until your government pays for their release." Another pause. Then Captain Ilyana spoke again, her voice calm. "Understood. We are complying with your instructions." The sensors showed the coalition ships reducing power to their weapon systems. Their shields weakened. They were drifting now, helpless in the asteroid field. Wraith began calculating how many troops he would need to secure 5 ships. Then everything changed. The human ship did not stop moving. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the nearest asteroid, a massive rock spinning slowly through space. At the last moment, the ship fired its thrusters and swung around the asteroid's far side, disappearing from sensors. "What are they doing?" Brennan asked. Before Wraith could answer, the asteroid exploded. Not completely, but enough to send huge fragments flying in all directions. The pieces moved fast, pushed by carefully placed charges that the humans must have fired in the seconds they were hidden. 3 of those fragments hit Talveen ships. 1 destroyer took a glancing blow that collapsed its forward shield. Another had its communications array destroyed. The 3rd ship lost engine control and began spinning. "Return fire," Wraith shouted. "All ships target the human vessel." But the human ship was already moving again, using the asteroid field like cover, never staying in one place. The other 4 coalition vessels, which had seemed ready to surrender, suddenly brought their weapons back online and began coordinated attacks. "They lied," Brennan said, shock clear in his voice. "They pretended to surrender and then attacked. That is not how warfare works." Wraith felt anger rising in his chest. This was wrong, dishonorable. Civilized species did not use deception in battle, but his anger would not help now. He needed to think, spread the fleet out. "Do not let them use the asteroids against us. Pursue the human ship, but watch for traps." His orders went out and the Talveen ships moved into formation. They were still stronger, still more numerous. This small trick would not save the coalition force, except the tricks kept coming. The humans released dozens of small objects that looked like escape pods on sensors. Half the Talveen ships wasted time and ammunition destroying them, only to discover they were empty shells filled with metal scraps. Meanwhile, the real human ship attacked from an unexpected angle. They hacked into Talveen communications and filled the channels with noise, making coordination difficult. They fired missiles that did not try to hit ships directly, but instead exploded near them, creating clouds of metal fragments that damaged sensors and weapon ports. Every time Wraith predicted where the human ship would go, it went somewhere else. Every time he prepared for one kind of attack, they used another. The battle that should have lasted minutes stretched into an hour, and Talveen casualties mounted. "Commander, they have launched something at us," Brennan warned. "Small pod moving fast. Destroy it. Our weapons are tracking, but it keeps changing direction. The movements are random, impossible to predict." The pod struck the hull before anyone could stop it. Alarms screamed through the ship. "Cutting equipment detected on the outer hull," a technician reported. "They are trying to board us." Wraith could not believe what he was hearing. A single small pod trying to board a battleship? That was suicide. He sent security teams to the breach point and waited for the intruders to die. 3 minutes later, the security team leader reported back, his voice tight with pain. "Commander, we need reinforcements. These humans, they fight like nothing I have ever seen. We hit one of them 3 times and it kept coming. They move too fast and work together perfectly. We cannot hold them." Wraith grabbed his weapon and ran toward the breach point himself. He had to see this with his own eyes. When he arrived, 4 of his security team were down. 3 humans in combat armor fought in the corridor, their movements smooth and efficient. One of them had taken a plasma bolt to the shoulder, but still fired its weapon with the other arm. Wraith aimed carefully and shot the wounded human in the chest. The bolt hit squarely, enough energy to drop any Talveen warrior. The human stumbled back, fell to one knee, then stood up again. Its armor was scorched but had somehow held. For the first time in 40 cycles, Commander Wraith felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear crept into his mind as he watched the humans advance, and he began to wonder if everything he knew about combat was about to be proven wrong. Blood the color of deep purple stained the corridor walls where Talveen security forces had fallen. Wraith fired again at the advancing humans, this time aiming for the joints in their armor where protection seemed thinner. His shot connected with one human's knee and the warrior finally went down. But the other 2 did not stop or even slow down to help their fallen companion. "Fall back to the next bulkhead," Wraith ordered his remaining troops. "Seal the corridor behind us." They retreated in good order and the heavy door slammed shut between them and the humans. Wraith expected the intruders to either try cutting through the door or find another route. Instead, the sensors showed them doing something completely unexpected. They were placing explosive charges on the door but not to breach it. The charges were small, positioned in a pattern that made no tactical sense. When the charges detonated, they did not destroy the door. They damaged the locking mechanism and the pressure seals, making the corridor section unstable. Atmosphere began leaking from that part of the ship. "They are trying to force us to depressurize the section," Brennan said over the communication link. "If we do that, we lose access to 3 decks. If we do not, the leak will spread," Wraith replied. "Either way, 3 humans are controlling our response." He made the decision and ordered those sections sealed. Somewhere in his ship, 3 enemy soldiers had created a zone they could control, and he had to pull warriors from other positions to contain them. With only 3 soldiers, the humans had disrupted his entire defensive arrangement. More reports came in from the rest of the battle. 2 Talveen destroyers had collided with asteroids while trying to chase the human ship through the field. Another had suffered a reactor malfunction after human electronic attacks confused its automated systems. The coalition forces had lost ships too, but they were making the Talveen fleet pay for every victory. "Commander, the human ship is broadcasting something," the communications officer said. "It appears to be music." "Music? During a battle?" "Yes, sir. Very loud music with heavy percussion. It makes no sense." Wraith listened to a few seconds of the transmission. The music was aggressive, full of drums and shouting voices. Why would anyone broadcast this during combat? Then he understood. It was not for the humans. It was for the Talveen. It was meant to confuse them, make them wonder what kind of enemy plays music while fighting. It was psychological warfare, another tactic he had never encountered in 40 cycles of honorable combat. "Block all frequencies from the coalition ships," he ordered. "I do not want our crews hearing this." But the damage was already done. His warriors were unsettled, questioning why the enemy behaved so strangely. The music had accomplished its purpose. Wraith's ship shuddered as another impact struck the hull. The human boarding party was moving again, having somehow survived in the depressurized section. They wore suits that provided their own atmosphere and had used the confusion to advance deeper into the ship. All security teams, converge on Section 12, Wraith commanded. I want those humans stopped before they reach anything critical. 20 Talveen warriors responded to his order. They were trained, experienced fighters who had served in multiple campaigns. 20 against 3 should be overwhelming odds. But the humans had reached the ship's environmental control center. When the Talveen forces arrived, they found the door sealed and reinforced from the inside. The humans were not trying to destroy the systems. They were taking control of them. Temperature in various parts of the ship began to fluctuate. Lighting failed in some corridors. Gravity in one section increased to nearly twice normal, making movement difficult for the Talveen forces trying to respond. How are they doing this? Brennan demanded. They should not even understand our systems. Wraith had no answer. Everything the humans did seemed impossible, yet they kept doing it anyway. Outside the ship, the battle continued to spiral in unexpected directions. The human ship had stopped running and turned to face the Talveen fleet directly. This should have been suicide, but Captain Ileana had timed her move perfectly. She positioned her ship so that any Talveen vessel firing at her would risk hitting friendly ships in the background. She is using our own formation against us, Wraith realized. If we fire, we might hit our own forces. Should we pursue with fighters? Brennan asked. No, she wants us to send fighters. It is a trap. Even as he said it, 3 Talveen commanders ignored the warning and launched fighter squadrons. The small craft swarmed toward the human ship, their pilots eager for glory. The human ship did not fight the fighters directly. Instead, it flew into the thickest part of the asteroid field, where the rock spun and tumbled in chaotic patterns. The Talveen pilots followed, confident in their skills. Then the human ship released its cargo bay contents. Not weapons, but small rockets that struck specific asteroids and changed their rotation. The asteroids began colliding with each other, creating a cascade of destruction that filled the space with deadly debris. Half the Talveen fighters were destroyed in seconds. The rest retreated, their formation broken and their confidence shattered. Wraith watched all of this happen and felt something shifting in his understanding of warfare. The humans did not fight like any species he had ever encountered. They did not follow the rules. They did not seek honorable victory. They simply did whatever worked, whatever kept them alive for one more minute, whatever gave them the smallest advantage. A direct communication channel opened from the human ship. Captain Ileana's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, and Wraith could see scorch marks on the wall behind her. Her ship was damaged, her crew exhausted, but her eyes showed no fear. Commander Wraith, she said, I am offering you a chance to withdraw. Take your fleet and leave this sector. If you do, we will not pursue. You are offering me terms? Wraith could not hide his surprise. Your ship is outnumbered and damaged. My forces still have the advantage, do they? Captain Ileana smiled slightly. You have lost 3 ships completely and 5 more are heavily damaged. Your flagship has intruders aboard that you cannot remove. My forces have been in this asteroid field for 3 months preparing for your arrival. We know every rock, every trajectory, every hiding place. You are fighting in our territory now, by our rules. So I ask again, will you withdraw? Wraith wanted to refuse. Pride demanded that he continue the fight until the humans were crushed. But pride did not win battles, especially not against an enemy who fought this way. I will consider your offer, he said carefully. But first I want to know something. Why do you fight like this? Without honor, without following any recognized rules of warfare. Captain Ileana's expression became serious. We fight to protect our people and our allies. Honor means nothing to the dead. Rules mean nothing when your home is burning. Humans learned warfare by fighting each other for thousands of years. We learned that survival matters more than glory. If that makes us dishonorable in your eyes, then so be it. The communication ended, leaving Wraith alone with his thoughts. Around him, his ship creaked and groaned from battle damage. Alarms still sounded from the sections where the human boarding party continued to cause chaos. The fleet waited for his orders. He looked at Brennan, who watched him with expectation. His first officer believed in the Talveen way, trusted that their superior numbers and firepower would eventually prevail. Perhaps they would. But Wraith found himself wondering what the cost would be, and whether victory over humans was worth what they would have to sacrifice to achieve it. The repair crews worked through the night cycle, welding torn metal and replacing damaged systems throughout the ship. Wraith had withdrawn from the asteroid field as Captain Ileana suggested, though he told his superiors it was a tactical repositioning. The truth sat heavy in his mind. He had retreated because continuing the fight would have destroyed his fleet for no real gain. 3 Talveen ships would never fight again. Their crews had been recovered, but the vessels themselves were being stripped for parts. 5 more ships needed extensive repairs that would take months. Against 5 smaller coalition vessels, including 1 crewed mostly by humans, the mighty Talveen fleet had barely managed to disengage without complete disaster. Wraith sat in his quarters reviewing battle recordings for the 100th time. Each viewing revealed new details about how the humans fought. They had studied Talveen tactics carefully, predicted every standard response, and prepared counters for each one. When his ships formed defensive positions, the humans had already identified the weak points. When he sent boarding parties, the humans knew where they would enter and prepared ambushes. They knew us better than we knew ourselves, Wraith muttered to the empty room. A chime at his door announced Brennan's arrival. His first officer looked as exhausted as Wraith felt. "The intelligence reports you requested," Brennan said, holding out a data tablet. "Information about humanity and their homeworld." Wraith took the tablet and began reading. What he found disturbed him more than the battle had. Humans came from a world they called Earth, a planet that seemed designed to create survivors. Their evolution had been shaped by constant danger. They were persistence hunters, creatures who chased prey not by being faster but by simply refusing to stop. Their bodies could regulate temperature through sweating, allowing them to run for hours while their prey collapsed from exhaustion. They healed from injuries that would kill most species. Their minds were wired to find patterns, solve problems, and adapt to new situations with frightening speed. But the truly disturbing part was their history with each other. Humans had spent thousands of years fighting wars against other humans. They had developed every possible way to kill, from simple clubs to weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had fought over territory, resources, ideas, and sometimes for no clear reason at all. The report included terms Wraith had never heard before. Guerrilla warfare, where weaker forces used hit-and-run tactics to bleed stronger enemies over time. Psychological operations using fear and confusion as weapons. Total war, where entire populations mobilized and no distinction existed between soldiers and support infrastructure. They have been preparing for war their entire existence, Brennan said quietly. Not war against aliens or monsters. War against each other, other humans. How does a species survive that? Wraith asked. How do they not destroy themselves? The report suggests they came close several times, but they also developed diplomacy, peace treaties, and international cooperation. They learned to stop fighting when the cost became too high. That is why they joined the coalition. They wanted to try a different way. Wraith set down the tablet and rubbed his eyes. Everything he thought he understood about warfare had been challenged by these humans. The Talveen fought for honor, glory, and to prove their superiority. Humans fought to survive and protect each other. Those were completely different motivations that led to completely different tactics. A message arrived from Talveen High Command. They wanted a prisoner exchange. Some coalition soldiers had been captured in other battles, and the coalition was holding Talveen warriors as well. The exchange would take place at a neutral station, and Wraith was ordered to attend as part of the Dominion's delegation. 2 weeks later, Wraith found himself in a conference room aboard a trading station that belonged to neither side. Across the table sat Captain Ileana, looking much healthier than during their last communication. She was smaller than Wraith expected, barely reaching his shoulder in height. Her skin had a brown tone and her hair was dark and pulled back in a simple style. She wore a clean uniform with several medals, and her dark eyes watched him with obvious intelligence. "Commander Wraith," she said with a slight nod, "I am glad you survived the battle." "As am I regarding you," Wraith replied. "Proper courtesy demanded respect between warriors, even enemy warriors. Your tactics were effective. Thank you. Your fleet fought well also. We lost good people in that engagement." They discussed the logistics of the prisoner exchange. Everything was formal and professional. But when the official business concluded and before either left the room, Wraith found himself unable to stay silent. "I must ask you something, Captain. Why do your people fight the way you do? Without regard for honor or traditional combat doctrine?" Ileana leaned back in her chair, considering her answer carefully. May I tell you about human history, Commander? It will take a few minutes. Wraith nodded, genuinely curious. Humans fought each other for thousands of years, Ilyana began. We had wars over territory, resources, religion, political systems, and sometimes just because we were different from each other. We developed terrible weapons and used them. Millions died in conflicts that, looking back, seem pointless. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times. Then how do you still exist? Because we learned. Slowly, painfully, but we learned. We discovered that war has costs beyond the battlefield. We created international laws, peace organizations, and treaties. We learned that sometimes you need to compromise, to find solutions that do not involve killing each other. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. But we never forgot how to fight. We never lost those skills. So when we encountered the wider galaxy and found that wars still happened out here, we knew what to do. We fight not because we love it, Commander. We fight because we desperately want to survive it and go home to our families. The Talveen fight for honor, Wraith said. For glory and to prove our worth as warriors. I understand that, Ilyana replied. Truly I do. But honor is a luxury, Commander. It is something you can afford when you know you will survive the battle. Humans never had that guarantee. So we learned to fight dirty, to use every advantage to do whatever it took to see another day. Not because we are better warriors than you, because we are more desperate. Wraith absorbed her words in silence. She was right. The Talveen had ritualized warfare over centuries until it became almost a sport with rules and referees. Battles were fought between militaries while civilian populations watched from safety. Warriors sought personal glory, and the worst consequence of defeat was usually capture and eventual ransom. Humans came from a world where defeat meant death, where wars consumed entire civilizations, where desperation bred innovation and survival trumped everything else. Your people terrify me, Wraith admitted quietly. Not because you are stronger or have better weapons, because you think about warfare in ways we never imagined. Ilyana smiled sadly. We terrify ourselves sometimes, Commander. That is why so many humans joined the coalition. We hoped to find a better way than what our ancestors did. The prisoner exchange proceeded smoothly after that conversation. Wraith returned to his fleet with more questions than answers. The Dominion wanted to continue the war, to push the coalition back and claim more territory. But Wraith now understood that fighting humans would not be like fighting any other species. They would not surrender when honor demanded it. They would not follow the rules. They would simply continue fighting with everything they had until either they won or they were completely destroyed. That night, Wraith made a decision that would change his life. He began studying everything available about human warfare. If the Dominion insisted on continuing this conflict, then Talveen forces needed to understand what they were really facing. Not honorable warriors seeking glory, but desperate survivors willing to do anything to protect their people. And Wraith realized that perhaps there was something to learn from that desperation, something that made humans more formidable than any enemy he had faced in 40 cycles of war. 3 months passed since the prisoner exchange, and the border war grew worse instead of better. Talveen High Command refused to accept what Wraith tried to tell them about human capabilities. They saw his reports as excuses for failure, his warnings as cowardice. Instead of learning from the encounter, they committed more ships and more warriors to crush what they called the human problem once and for all. Wraith received a promotion to fleet commander and new orders. He would lead an assault on a human colony world called Newton's Haven, a farming settlement that supported coalition forces in the sector. Intelligence suggested the colony had minimal defenses, mostly civilian infrastructure with a small garrison. Taking it would demonstrate Talveen power and give them a valuable bargaining position. The invasion fleet assembled at the border, 12 warships carrying thousands of troops. Wraith commanded from a new flagship, and Brennan remained at his side despite offers of his own command. Some things stayed constant even as the galaxy shifted around them. The colony has 300,000 civilians, Brennan reported as they approached Newton's Haven. Mostly humans, but also members of 4 other coalition species. Defensive installations are limited. A single orbital platform with light weapons, 2 ground bases, and perhaps 500 soldiers total. And yet I do not trust this, Wraith said. Everything about humans suggests they would not leave such a valuable target lightly defended. Perhaps they lack the resources. The coalition is spread thin across many systems. Wraith wanted to believe that, but could not shake his concerns. Still, orders were orders. The fleet moved into orbit around Newton's Haven, and Wraith opened communications with the planet. This is Fleet Commander Wraith of the Talveen Dominion. Newton's Haven is now under our control. We are prepared to occupy your world. Order your civilians to remain in their homes and your military forces to surrender immediately. Comply and no harm will come to your population. A human man appeared on screen wearing the uniform of a coalition officer. He looked young, perhaps in his 30s by human standards, with light brown skin and tired eyes. This is Lieutenant Garrison, commanding Newton's Haven Defense Forces. We have received your message. I need 2 hours to organize the evacuation of civilians to shelters and ensure an orderly surrender. You have 1 hour, Wraith replied. After that, we begin landing troops whether you are ready or not. Garrison nodded and ended the transmission. Wraith watched through orbital sensors as the colony below mobilized. Civilian transports began moving toward the northern continent, away from the main settlements. Defensive forces took up positions around key infrastructure. Everything looked normal, exactly what he would expect from a small garrison preparing to surrender. The hour passed. Wraith sent landing ships toward the surface, 3,000 troops in the first wave. They would secure the capital city while additional forces locked down other settlements. The operation should be complete by nightfall. The landing ships entered atmosphere without incident. They approached the designated zones, expecting token resistance at most. Instead, the humans opened fire with every weapon they had. The orbital platform, which scans had identified as lightly armed, revealed hidden weapon batteries that tore into 2 landing ships before they could react. Ground-based missiles launched from camouflaged positions struck 3 more transports. Wraith watched in growing anger as 6 ships went down, carrying 300 soldiers to their deaths. They lied again, Brennan said. They used the hour to prepare their defenses and position their weapons. No, Wraith corrected. They used it to evacuate civilians. The defenses were already prepared. Lieutenant Garrison gave us exactly what he promised, an orderly process. We assumed that meant surrender. He never actually said that. The remaining landing ships made it to the surface and deployed their troops. Wraith expected the human garrison, outnumbered 6-1, to fall back to defensive positions and prepare for a siege. Instead, they attacked. Small human units hit Talveen forces from multiple directions using tactics Wraith recognized from his studies. They struck quickly, killed as many enemies as possible, then retreated before superior numbers could surround them. They used the urban environment perfectly, turning every building into a potential ambush point. Casualty reports coming in, Brennan announced, his voice tight. Heavy losses in sectors 3, 7, and 12. The humans are not fighting like a garrison preparing to surrender. They are fighting like they expect to win. Wraith studied the tactical displays. The human defensive positions formed a pattern. They were not protecting the city or key infrastructure. They were protecting the evacuation routes where civilian transport still moved north. They are buying time, Wraith realized. They know they cannot hold the colony. They are sacrificing themselves so the civilians can escape. He had read about this human concept but never truly understood it. The garrison soldiers knew they would die. They knew surrender would save their lives. But they fought anyway because their deaths meant civilians lived. It was illogical by Talveen standards. A warrior's life had value. Throwing it away achieved nothing, except it did achieve something. Every hour the garrison held was another hour for transports to carry people to safety. Every Talveen soldier killed or wounded was one less pursuing the evacuation. The humans were spending their lives as carefully as merchants spent currency, extracting maximum value from every death. Days passed. The Talveen forces slowly ground down the human defenders through sheer numbers, but the cost was staggering. For every human soldier killed, 2 Talveen warriors fell. The humans had prepared the entire colony as a battlefield, with weapons caches, booby traps, and defensive positions that made every street a killing ground. Wraith saw things during that battle that would haunt him forever. A human soldier with both legs destroyed by plasma fire, propped against a wall, still firing her weapon to cover her squad's retreat. A medic who ran into open ground under heavy fire to reach a wounded comrade, knowing she would almost certainly die. A squad that held a bridge for 6 hours against overwhelming odds, singing something as they fought, their voices carrying across the battlefield even as they fell one by one. On the 5th day, the last organized human resistance collapsed, Lieutenant Garrison and the survivors of his command made a final stand at the spaceport, holding it just long enough for the last civilian transport to escape into orbit. Then they surrendered what few remained alive. Wraith went to the spaceport himself to accept the surrender. He found Garrison sitting among the ruins, wounded in a dozen places but still conscious. Around him lay the bodies of soldiers from both sides. The human lieutenant had commanded 500 troops at the start. 37 survived. "The evacuation is complete," Garrison said as Talveen medics arrived. "You can have the colony now. The buildings, the farms, the equipment, all of it. But you did not get the people, and that is what matters." Wraith looked around at the devastation. His forces had taken the colony, yes, but at what cost? 2,000 Talveen warriors dead or wounded. A dozen ships damaged or destroyed. And for what? Empty buildings and abandoned infrastructure. The humans had won by losing, achieving their true objective while making the Talveen victory hollow. "Why?" Wraith asked Garrison. "Why did you stay? Why not evacuate with the civilians?" Garrison looked up at him with those tired eyes. "Because someone had to buy them time. Because we are soldiers and protecting people is what we do. Because if we had run, you would have caught the transports and killed everyone. Our deaths meant their lives. That is a trade every human soldier understands. We would have accepted your surrender immediately. You did not need to fight. Yes, we did. You would have pursued the civilians after accepting our surrender. This way we controlled when and where the fighting happened. We made you pay for every meter of ground. We slowed you down until our people were safe. That is victory for humans, Commander. Not glory, not honor. Just keeping our people alive." Wraith had no response to that. He ordered the human prisoners treated well and withdrew to his flagship. The colony was his, but the victory felt like defeat. High Command would celebrate this success, claim it demonstrated Talveen's superiority, but Wraith knew better. The humans had taught him something important during that battle. They fought not for abstract concepts like honor or glory, but for concrete things they could see and touch. Their families, their friends, their homes. That gave them a strength that numbers and technology could not overcome. It gave them a reason to sacrifice everything, because some things mattered more than individual survival. Wraith spent the night after Newton's Haven fell, writing a new report for High Command. This time he did not mince words. He explained that fighting humans was not like fighting other species. He detailed their willingness to sacrifice, their tactical flexibility, their absolute dedication to protecting civilians. He predicted that continuing this war would cost the Dominion more than any possible gain could justify. High Command ignored his report completely, but Wraith knew others had read it. Young commanders, junior officers, warriors who saw the casualty lists and wondered if glory was worth the price. Seeds of doubt had been planted. Change would not come quickly, but perhaps it would come eventually, and Wraith found himself hoping more and more that it would come before both sides destroyed each other completely. 6 months into the war, Wraith commanded the largest Talveen fleet ever assembled in the border sectors. 40 warships, 15,000 soldiers, enough firepower to conquer a dozen worlds. High Command had grown tired of incremental victories and stalemates. They wanted a decisive battle that would break coalition resistance and force peace on Talveen terms. The target was the Talus system, a strategic nexus that connected 5 major trade routes. Whoever controlled Talus controlled commerce and military movement throughout the sector. Intelligence suggested the coalition was massing forces there as well, preparing for a major engagement. "This will be the largest space battle in a generation," Brennan observed as the fleet prepared to jump. "Both sides are committing everything they can spare." Wraith nodded but felt no excitement. He had read everything available about human military history, studying their wars, their tactics, their philosophy. One lesson kept appearing in every analysis. Humans were most dangerous when they faced impossible odds, when desperation forced them to innovate beyond normal limitations. "The coalition fleet has humans in key positions," Wraith said. "That concerns me more than their numbers. The intelligence reports suggest we still outnumber them significantly. Victory should be assured. Intelligence also suggested Newton's Haven would fall without serious resistance. We know how that prediction turned out." The fleet jumped to Talus and emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Sensors immediately detected coalition forces positioned near the system's central star, exactly where intelligence had predicted. Both fleets saw each other and both began maneuvering for advantage. Wraith studied the tactical display carefully. Something felt wrong. The coalition position made no strategic sense. They were too close to the star, limiting their maneuvering room. Any competent commander would position forces further out where they had more options. "They want us to attack from this vector," Wraith said, tracing possible approach routes. "Every logical path brings us into a narrow engagement zone. Should we refuse battle and withdraw?" "No, High Command expects victory today. We attack but carefully. All ships maintain maximum separation. I want overlapping fields of fire with no blind spots. And be ready for anything unexpected. The humans always have surprises." The Talvine fleet advanced in formation. The coalition responded by pulling back slightly, staying near the star. Wraith sent scouts ahead, expecting mines or hidden weapons platforms. They found nothing. The coalition fleet waited, apparently outnumbered and outgunned, making no aggressive moves. When the Talvine forces reached optimal firing range, Wraith gave the order to engage. Hundreds of weapons lit up space between the fleets. The battle had begun. For 15 minutes, everything proceeded normally. Ships on both sides took damage. Talvine numerical superiority began to tell as coalition vessels fell back under concentrated fire. It looked like High Command had been right. This would be a conventional victory after all. Then the humans revealed their plan. Coalition ships near the star activated equipment that had been hidden among their normal systems. Not weapons, but scientific instruments of enormous power. They fired these instruments at the star itself at specific points on its surface. "What are they doing?" Brennan demanded as alerts sounded across every Talvine ship. Wraith watched in horror as he understood. The humans were triggering a solar flare, a massive ejection of plasma and radiation from the star. Not enough to destroy the star or even significantly harm it, but enough to create a wave of electromagnetic energy that would sweep across the system in minutes. "All ships, emergency shutdown of non-essential systems," Wraith ordered. "Bring up radiation shields. Prepare for electromagnetic pulse," but there was not enough time. The flare erupted from the star's surface, accelerated by whatever the humans had done. The wave hit the coalition fleet first, but they were ready. Their ships went dark. Systems shut down, running on minimal backup power. When the wave reached the Talvine fleet, chaos erupted. Electronic systems throughout the ships failed or malfunctioned. Weapons went offline. Shields collapsed. Navigation failed. Communication between vessels became impossible. Half the fleet was effectively disabled in seconds. The other half, including Wraith's flagship, managed to shut down fast enough to preserve core systems. But they were running on emergency power, their combat capabilities reduced to a fraction of normal. Then the coalition fleet came back online. They had prepared for this, designed their systems to restart quickly after the pulse. Within minutes, they were operational again, while most of the Talvine fleet drifted helpless. "They deliberately created conditions where technology does not matter," Wraith said with something like admiration. "They reduced this battle to close-range combat with manual weapons, the kind of fighting where human adaptability gives them an advantage." Coalition ships moved among the disabled Talvine vessels, targeting those that still had power. But they did not simply destroy them. They disabled engines and weapons, leaving life support intact. They were trying to remove ships from the battle without killing the crews. "Why do they not finish us?" Brennan asked. "They have the advantage now. Because humans understand something we do not. Every Talvine warrior they kill today becomes a blood debt that extends this war. Every ship they spare is a debt we owe them. They are thinking beyond this battle to what comes after." Wraith's flagship still had maneuvering capability and weapons. He could continue fighting, rally the ships that remained operational, make the coalition pay for their victory. But what would that accomplish? More deaths, more destruction, and ultimately the same outcome. The humans had won this engagement through tactics that no Talvine commander would have considered. Before Wraith could decide his next action, new contacts appeared on sensors. Not military ships, but pirates, scavengers who followed fleets to loot disabled vessels. They had detected the electromagnetic pulse from light years away and jumped in expecting easy prey. The pirate vessels, 20 or more small ships, began moving toward the disabled Talvine fleet. They carried breaching equipment and weapons designed to cut through hulls. Their crews were known for taking prisoners and selling them to various criminal enterprises. Coalition ships moved to intercept the pirates, but they were too far away to stop the raiders from reaching several Talvine vessels. Wraith watched helplessly as pirate boarding teams prepared to breach his ships. Then something unexpected happened. A human voice came over the emergency channel, speaking accented Talveen. Talveen vessels, this is Lieutenant Hayes of Coalition Marines. We have boarding craft available. Request permission to deploy to your ships to repel pirate boarders. Wraith looked at Brennan in surprise. The humans wanted to protect Talveen ships? From pirates? This could be a trick, Brennan warned. A way to capture our ships. Or it could be exactly what it appears. They need to make a choice before the pirates breach our ships. Wraith opened the channel. Permission granted, Lieutenant Hayes. Deploy your forces to any Talveen vessel under pirate attack. We will transmit access codes. Within minutes, human boarding craft reached 4 Talveen ships where pirates had already cut through the hulls. The human marines hit the pirate teams hard and fast, using exactly the kind of aggressive tactics Wraith had seen before. But this time those tactics were protecting Talveen lives. On one vessel, the situation got desperate. Pirates had reached the engineering section and were threatening to blow the reactor, unless the crew surrendered. The human team had to fight through the entire ship to reach them, taking casualties as they went. Wraith monitored the communication channels, listening to the human marines coordinate their assault. One voice stood out, giving orders with calm authority. Lieutenant Hayes herself leading from the front. Green team flank left, red team suppressing fire. I am going through the center. Get ready to breach on my signal. The assault lasted 6 minutes. When it ended, the pirates were dead or captured. The reactor was safe, and 3 human marines had been seriously wounded, including Hayes. Talveen crew members, who had been pinned down and helpless, provided emergency medical care to the humans who had saved them. By the time all the pirate raiders were driven off or destroyed, something strange had happened. Talveen and human forces were working together, coordinating their actions against a common enemy. Warriors who had been trying to kill each other an hour ago were now sharing medical supplies and technical expertise. Wraith's ship regained full power as the engineering teams repaired damage from the electromagnetic pulse. He could have ordered his ships to resume combat. The battle was technically not over, but when he looked at the tactical display, he saw Talveen and Coalition vessels side by side, both groups rescuing survivors and collecting the dead. He opened a direct channel to the Coalition flagship and was not surprised when Captain Ileana's face appeared. Commander Wraith, she said. An interesting battle. Captain Ileana, I should note that your solar flare tactic was brilliant and infuriating in equal measure. She smiled slightly. Thank you. And I should note that you could have left my Marines to fight the pirates alone. You did not. Your gunners provided covering fire that saved several human lives. They were protecting my people. Honor demanded we assist them. And your assistance is appreciated. Ileana paused, her expression becoming more serious. Commander, I'm going to propose something unusual. This battle is over. Both our fleets are damaged and need repairs. What if we declared a local ceasefire, a temporary truce while both sides recover? We could share this system, help each other with repairs, and avoid further casualties. High Command would never approve such an arrangement. Then do not ask permission. Make a command decision in the field. Sometimes warriors understand each other better than politicians do. Wraith considered the proposal. It was irregular, possibly insubordinate, and completely contrary to his orders. It was also the right thing to do. Agreed, he said. A temporary ceasefire while both fleets effect repairs. 3 days, after which we will withdraw to our respective territories and let our superiors decide what happens next. Agreed. Over the following 3 days, something remarkable happened. Talveen and human engineers worked together on damaged systems. Medical personnel shared techniques and treatments. Warriors from both sides told stories of the battle, finding common ground and shared experience. Lieutenant Hayes spent time aboard Wraith's flagship, recovering from her injuries, and Wraith had long conversations with her about warfare, honor, and purpose. Why did you risk your life to protect Talveen soldiers? Wraith asked her. We are enemies. Hayes considered the question carefully, because in that moment it was the right thing to do. The pirates were the enemy. You were just people in danger. Humans believe you help people in danger, regardless of who they are. It is called humanity, which is interesting since it is our species name. Your people see things very differently than mine. Maybe, or maybe we just care about different things in a different order. You value honor and glory. We value survival and protecting others. Neither is wrong, Commander. They are just different. When the 3 days ended, both fleets withdrew as agreed. But something had changed. Wraith returned to Talveen space with a new understanding. The war would continue because neither side could simply stop. But now he knew that humans were not monsters or dishonorable savages. They were warriors fighting for their people with every tool available, just as he fought for his. And perhaps someday, there could be a peace where both sides could respect each other instead of dying for abstract principles that satisfied politicians, but meant nothing to the dead. Part 6. A New Understanding 1. Year after that first disastrous encounter in the asteroid field, Wraith found himself aboard a neutral station at the border between Talveen and Coalition space. He wore his dress uniform, all medals and honors on display, but felt none of the pride those decorations once brought. Everything had changed. He had changed. The war had ground to a brutal stalemate. Neither side could achieve decisive victory without casualties that would cripple their entire civilization. The Talveen Dominion had lost 30% of its fleet. The Coalition had suffered similar losses. Thousands of warriors on both sides were dead or wounded. Dozens of worlds had been damaged or occupied. And for what? Territory that neither side could hold? Pride that meant nothing to the dead? High Command had finally accepted reality and agreed to peace negotiations. Wraith suspected his reports had influenced that decision, though no one would admit it officially. The Dominion needed an honorable way to end a war they could not win, and negotiations provided that opportunity. The Coalition delegation arrived first. Wraith watched from an observation window as their ships docked. He recognized several vessels, including the repaired Defiant Spirit under Captain Ilyana's command. She had been promoted to admiral during the war, earning that rank through brilliance and sacrifice. When the Coalition delegation entered the conference chamber, Wraith saw familiar faces. Admiral Ilyana, looking older than when they had first met but still carrying herself with quiet confidence. Lieutenant Hayes, now Captain Hayes, walking with a slight limp from injuries that had never fully healed. And others, humans and aliens working together with the easy cooperation that seemed natural for the Coalition. The Talveen delegation included Brennan, now Commander Brennan with his own ship, and several high-ranking officials from the Dominion government. They took their seats across from the Coalition representatives and the negotiations began. The first days were formal and difficult. Both sides presented their positions, made demands, and argued over territory and reparations. Progress was minimal, but every evening, after the official sessions ended, Wraith found himself having private conversations with Ilyana and other Coalition officers. Those conversations revealed more than any formal negotiation could. Your people believe we are weak because we use unconventional tactics, Ilyana said during one evening meal, that we fight without honor because we refuse to follow your rules. I believed that once, Wraith admitted. I was wrong. Your tactics are not dishonorable. They are simply different. You fight to survive and protect while we fight to prove ourselves. Neither is wrong. They arise from different histories. Tell me about Talveen history, Ilyana said. Help me understand. Wraith explained how his people had nearly destroyed themselves thousands of years ago in wars of total annihilation. The survivors had created the honor codes and ritualized warfare specifically to prevent that from happening again. Combat became a way to settle disputes without genocide, a pressure valve for aggressive instincts that might otherwise consume their civilization. We made war civilized, Wraith said. We gave it rules and meaning beyond simple killing. For millennia, that system worked. But then we encountered humans and our rules meant nothing. Your desperation was stronger than our honor. Not stronger, Ilyana corrected gently. Just different. Humans never had the luxury of civilized warfare. We were too divided, too tribal, too desperate for resources on one small planet. We had to develop every possible tactic just to survive each other. When we finally achieved some unity and joined the galaxy, we brought those survival instincts with us. Captain Hayes joined the conversation. The thing is, Commander, humans do understand honor. We just define it differently. Honor means keeping promises, protecting the weak, never abandoning comrades. Honor means doing what is right even when it costs you everything. But honor does not mean following rules that get your people killed. Over the following days, these informal conversations began to influence the formal negotiations. Wraith proposed something radical during one session. Instead of simply defining borders and ending hostilities, What if the two sides established something more permanent? A joint commission to study warfare, tactics, and defense. Talveen officers could learn human adaptability. Human forces could learn Talveen discipline and strategic thinking. The Dominion representatives objected immediately. Sharing military secrets with former enemies? That is unprecedented. So was fighting humans, Wraith replied. Everything about this war was unprecedented. Perhaps peace should be unprecedented as well. We can continue as enemies, preparing for the next war, bleeding each other for generations. Or we can become something new. Not allies, perhaps, but partners in understanding. Admiral Ileana supported the proposal from the coalition side. Humans know we cannot afford another war like this. If working with the Talveen prevents future conflicts, then we should try. Besides, we might learn something useful. The debate continued for days. But gradually, pragmatism won over pride. Both sides had lost too much to continue fighting over principles. A framework emerged for peace, including provisions for military exchanges, joint training exercises, and regular communication between commanders. During a break in negotiations, Wraith walked through the station's observation deck. He found himself looking at the stars and thinking about everything that had changed. A year ago, he had believed he understood combat completely. He had been so wrong. Impressive view, a voice said behind him. Captain Hayes approached, moving carefully on her injured leg. Captain, should you be walking so much? Probably not, but I get restless sitting in meetings all day. She joined him at the window. You know, Commander, my people have a saying. The best warrior is not the one who wins the most battles. It is the one who prevents battles from being necessary. That is a wise saying. We learned it the hard way. Centuries of war taught us that winning is not the same as being right. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop fighting. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Hayes spoke again. I read your reports, Commander. The ones you sent to High Command describing human tactics and capabilities. They were accurate, fair, and honest. You could have made us look like monsters, but you did not. You tried to make your superiors understand us. That took courage. I only reported what I observed.
No, you did more than that.
You changed your mind. You let yourself see that your assumptions were wrong. Most warriors never do that. They hold on to their pride until it kills them. Wraith thought about her words long after she left. She was right. He had changed, and that change had been painful. Everything he believed about warfare, honor, and combat had been challenged. But he was better for it. Stronger, not in the way Talveen society measured strength, but in ways that mattered more. The negotiations concluded after 3 weeks. The treaty was not perfect, but it was real. Borders were established, prisoner exchanges arranged, and the framework for ongoing cooperation created. Both sides agreed to a 5-year peace with provisions to extend it indefinitely, if both parties wished. The signing ceremony was formal and brief. Representatives from both governments added their marks to the document, while cameras recorded the moment for history. It was all very official and meaningless compared to what came after. Following the ceremony, an informal reception allowed both delegations to meet casually. Wraith found himself talking with Admiral Ileana one final time before they returned to their respective territories. What will you do now? She asked. Return to command? Yes, but different commands. The Dominion is creating a new training academy focused on adaptive tactics and unconventional warfare. They want me to lead it. Ileana smiled. They want you to teach Talveen warriors to fight like humans. Not exactly like humans. But to learn from you, to understand that there are many ways to approach problems and rigid thinking is a weakness, to see enemies as potential partners rather than targets. He paused. And you? What are your plans? Similar work. The Coalition wants me overseeing the exchange program, making sure humans and Talveen actually learn from each other, instead of just watching each other, suspiciously. Then we will be working together in a way. Yes, strange how things work out. Wraith extended his hand in the human gesture of farewell he had learned. Ileana shook it firmly, her smaller hand gripping his with surprising strength. I believed I knew combat, Wraith said quietly. Until humanity showed me I knew nothing. You taught me that true strength is not about winning battles, but about knowing when to fight and when to stop fighting. You taught me that survival matters more than glory, and protecting others matters more than personal honor. You taught me that the greatest warrior is the one who makes war unnecessary. And you taught us something too, Commander. You taught us that honor has value, that discipline and tradition can be strengths, and that former enemies can become friends if both sides are willing to see each other as people rather than obstacles. You could have continued fighting out of pride. Instead, you chose to understand. That took more courage than any battle. The delegations departed over the following hours. Wraith returned to Talveen space aboard his flagship, watching the coalition ships disappear into faster-than-light travel. Brennan stood beside him, silent and thoughtful.
Do you think it will last?
Brennan asked eventually. The peace? I do not know. But I know we have a chance now. A year ago, we had none. We were locked into a war neither side could win, killing each other over pride and misunderstanding. Now we have the opportunity to do something different. The younger officers talk about you, you know. They say you changed after fighting the humans. Some criticize you for it. Others admire you. And what do you think? Brennan considered the question carefully. I think you saw something the rest of us missed. You understood that the galaxy is larger than we knew, and other species have things to teach us if we are willing to learn. That is not weakness, Commander. That is wisdom. Wraith nodded, accepting the assessment. He thought about Lieutenant Garrison sacrificing himself to save civilians. He remembered Captain Hayes risking her life to protect Talveen sailors from pirates. He recalled Admiral Ilyana's words about fighting not because humans loved war, but because they desperately wanted to survive it. Humans had shown him what real strength looked like, not physical power or technological superiority, but adaptability, determination, and the courage to protect others at any cost. They fought with everything they had, using tactics that shocked and horrified traditional warriors. But they did it for reasons Wraith could finally understand and respect. The war had cost both sides terribly, but it had also taught valuable lessons to those willing to learn. Wraith had begun the conflict as a proud veteran who believed he knew everything about combat. He ended it as a student, humbled and enlightened, understanding that true knowledge meant recognizing how much he still had to learn. As his ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying him home to begin this new phase of his life, Wraith allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that the peace would hold. Hope that both species could learn from each other. Hope that the next generation would not have to fight the wars his generation had started. He had believed he knew combat. Humanity had shown him that combat was only a small part of a much larger picture. And in showing him that, they had given him the greatest gift one warrior could give another. They had shown him a better way forward, a path where strength meant understanding, where honor meant cooperation, and where victory meant everyone survived to see tomorrow. That was the true strength humanity had shown him. Not the power to win battles, but the wisdom to make battles unnecessary, and that was a lesson worth learning, worth teaching, and worth building a future upon.